first off, Koran, thank you so much for making some time for us to get together.
Absolutely.
I know we've been having conversations for more than a decade.
Absolutely.
For multiple hours every time we get together, and somehow we're going to try to figure out how to do this in 30 minutes today.
I don't know how, but we're going to figure it out. We're going to figure it out.
So first off, Koran Hardimon, a thought leader around the inclusion and belonging space.
Yes.
Thank you for joining the Future of Human Experience today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So Koran, tell us a little bit more about your journey, about your story, and the work that you care about so much about leading.
Sure. No, the focus that I really focus on is around inclusion and belonging, right? I learned all of this through my experiences through a lot of organizations and so forth. Specifically, I have to call out Intel. I have to call them out, right? I feel like Intel was my university of training, right? I spent 12 years there and learned so much from so many people. And that's where I got the bug of this work, right? My background's in leadership and development, and I understand how important leaders are in driving this work. But being able to step into it and really help organizations understand the benefit of inclusion and belonging and the importance of leaders helping drive that work is also very, very important to me. So done a variety of different things, worked at small companies, large companies, environmental services tech companies, currently at a tech company currently right now. But yeah, just done a variety of different things that really excite me in this work because I believe that it's important, right? And it's a pillar to organizational success and sustainment is really understanding how to make sure that our employees feel a sense of belonging and they feel included. And so that's the work that I drive.
I love it.
Yes.
And Koran, do you remember how we met?
Remind me. I know it was at Intel, but remind me.
All right. So the reason I asked you this because I felt that exact same mission and vision that you had
Absolutely.
13 years ago.
Yes.
It was actually at an ERG meeting.
Okay, yes.
And so you were leading the ERG meeting at that moment in time. I remember vividly going to that meeting because I wanted to understand not necessarily what it was to be a Latino in tech. I wanted to understand what it was to not be a Latino in tech. So I wanted to learn from different perspectives. So I went to other ERG meetings.
You did.
And I remember going to, that's how it was called.
Network of Intel African American, NIA. Yes.
Yeah. And then I remember going to that meeting and then you just welcomed me with open arms. And you're, hey man, thank you for coming. And you knew exactly why I was there.
Yeah.
Even though probably got some questions like, are you here for the free lunch? Like, why are you here? But you knew exactly that I was there to learn, to help just the overall mission of this important work that you're leading. With that said, and I know that sparked a friendship that's lasted all this time. With that said, what have you learned on this journey on bringing others along into this work as well? Like you have brought myself and so many others in this work that you're leading.
Yeah, so I'm a big believer that we have to meet people where they're at, right? I'm not a shame and blame. I'm a grace and space type of, thought leader, right? I believe people are on their own journey and we have to meet them where they're at when I call also inclusion nudges, right? We got to nudge them along, right? Because people are sometimes uncomfortable. Sometimes they're afraid to take a step, right? But I really am really big about understanding why individuals are at the spaces that they are and the places that they are and the experiences that they've had. Because if we can sit down and have these conversations, I now know what are the barriers for them, what are the concerns for them, also what are the commonalities that I could actually hook so that we can move forward, right? And so I believe everybody is part of this work. And I think a lot of times individuals feel like as soon as you say diversity, right, there's a group of people that don't feel connected to that. But I would challenge them and say, everyone is diverse in their own right? And we can go into the levels of diversity and all this other stuff, but everyone has a place in this work. And that is what I try to do is, where are you on your journey? Let me help you continue to progress on the journey. But in that, where can I make sure that you can be a voice as we move forward? So I'm always welcoming anyone that is excited about this work, right? You were excited when you came into the NIA, right? Yeah. And I want those type of individuals that have that passion because they will continue to learn. They will continue to ask questions. They will continue to want to understand the why, but they will also continue to understand what can they do better to move this forward. And so that's what I've learned. You got to give people space, but you also need to meet them kind of where they're at and help them get to the place that they're trying to go.
Yeah. And Koran, I mean, you mentioned it, right? Our conversation about diversity, it's evolved over time, right? And over the last, I would say, 18 months or so, there has been a difference of probably heightened difference of opinion in this space now.
Very much so.
How have you been navigating that? Yeah. Or better yet, what do you think are the root causes of that height? Because it seems that we had built this momentum in 2020, and now it just seems that we're rolling some things back. What has been some of your assessment of why organizations are doing that today?
Yeah, so We're be very candid. I think that current state right now is putting the spotlight on organizations that have been performative, who, 5, 6, 7 years ago, or 3, 4, 5 years ago, they did not want to get called out because they were not doing anything. But I think that people are now retracting, and they're getting called out because they are retracting because they didn't really want to do it. They just did it so they wouldn't be in the limelight, right? And so I think that there are some organizations that are nervous and scared, and I think that some of them may or may not have been as made this a pillar like they said it was, right? But then you have organizations that are still foot on the pedal and moving even faster now because of what's taken place, right? And it depends upon the organizational structure, it depends upon what they believe, and it also depends on leadership, right? At the end of the day, this work is really about what are organizational leaders really believing in, right? And so it's sad to see, to be very candid. I mean, we've done all this great work, right? And it's sad to see us kind of retreat. But again, there are some organizations that are out there that said, I don't care what's going on. I don't care what's in the news. This is a fundamental pillar for this organization. It is a benefit to this organization. They understand the value and the business case, because I think that's the other thing. I think sometimes when we talk about this, we don't talk about the business case for diversity, which I don't think we should have to do it anymore because we've been doing it for a very, very long time. But I still think that when you see organizations backtrack, they still don't understand the business case for diversity of thought, innovation. I mean, there's data after data after data that talks about the benefits of diverse thought leadership, representation in organizations. And I just feel like if you don't believe in that and organizations are not connected to that, they will continue to retreat backwards. But again, there are organizations that still foot on the pedal and doing some amazing things.
And they're playing the long game.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
With that said, Koran, you're also very passionate about building culture in organizations and companies.
Absolutely.
Give us a little bit more grounding on what does culture mean to you when you talk about it in the context of a company. Yeah,
so I think to me, culture is like a mirror of your organization, right? Mm-hmm. Culture to me is experiences and behaviors at the end of the day, right? I am a true believer that every experience that somebody has is building their experience of what culture is for that organization, good or bad. Right? So if I have an organization that recognizes me and I feel valued, that is the type of culture that I believe. But if I have experiences with my leadership that I don't feel trusted and I don't feel valued and I feel like, my contributions don't matter, then that's the culture that I'm building when I think about the organization. And so I always say culture to me are the thousands of experiences that people have with their colleagues and their leadership. That is what culture is. I think there's an enterprise culture, but I also think there's microcosm cultures as well. So someone that is, if you're a leader in a group, you're going to have your own culture because of who you are, right? I love having psychological safety. That is a piece of culture that is very important to me. Recognition is very important to me. Development and progression is very important to me. So that's my mini culture within my team, but we have an overall culture kind of drive and priority within the organization. So it's really about the experiences that people have. And I really want people to understand that. Culture is about the experiences that people have with the organization, good and or bad.
So when we talk about the future human experience, does the word culture also resonate with you when we talk about the role that even technology could play in how we're building these human experiences in corporations or in the workplace? Yeah,
it does. I mean, when I think about technology, let's be frank, some people think that technology is going to remove the human piece of it, right? Which means that that's going to shift the culture of an organization. This is just a technology-driven culture, right? And it's only about, what the most and greatest things that are coming down the pipeline. They're not thinking about the human piece of it, right? So I do believe it. But at the end of the day, humans drive culture, right? At the end of the day, it's the experiences that I have with somebody, not with a machine, not with the software, right? Culture is about people's experiences with people. So yes, that's what's important to this conversation. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I know you and we've been talking about human-centered leadership, human-centered culture, human-centered.
Yes.
And there's been a lot of momentum building out in that space, especially as the pendulum's been swinging into this AI world. There's been this sense of like, hey, how do we start focusing on what it is to be human today and tomorrow? Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about your journey into diving into space, especially with your plethora of experience in different industries and different companies of different sizes as well.
Yeah, I think everyone has a different perspective about what human centricity is, right? For me, I always say, especially in this work, before I come through an organizational door working for, whatever company that you work for, I am human first. Before I put on my title, I am Quran first when I get up out the bed and I, deal with my family or whatever, those dynamics are before I even put on my title to come into the organization. If organizations can meet people at that piece and that point, that's what human-centric leadership is all about. It's not when you come through the doors, it's before you even get to an organization. So when you think about remote working, when you think about how people need time off, when you think about certain type of benefits, when you think about just understanding the needs of your employees, that's even before they get to the organization. When they get to the organization, then they'll run through walls for you, right? You won't have to ask for certain things. But when you neglect that human piece, right? Those individuals will not show up for you, and they don't show up 100% because they haven't been approached at that space, right? Because they feel like you don't care about that space. And so human-centric leadership to me is just that. It's taking the moment to understand what we need as human beings and what is beneficial to us and what's different. What you need, Eric, is different than what I need. And leaders need to understand that it's not a peanut butter spread. We have to take time out to understand our employees and what they need. Can we give them everything? No, but also taking the time to understand and listen and recognize and acknowledge. Those are the things that helps build, human-centric leaders.
Yeah.
I get passionate about this.
No, I love it. Let's go. Let's go ahead.
Let's go.
What are the challenges that leaders face to do that then?
Okay.
Why would leaders then say, you know what, I know, Koran, this sounds great, but the best approach I have today is just peanut buttering?
Yeah, right, okay.
What are some of the challenges that you see leaders, organizations face that? Because what you're asking us goes back to the basic needs of being a human being.
Agreed.
Why do we remove ourselves from that practice and bring the peanut butter approach versus bringing the human-centered approach?
Sure. A couple things. One, I think that this is new for leaders. They have never had to do it. I think sometimes leaders are focused on getting the job done and not focused on, you also have to manage your team. I think a lot of times because of the type of environment that we're in, we're heads down, everything is shifting and changing. We got to be agile. And that is great, but you also have a team you need to manage as well. And I think sometimes the people piece of it gets left behind. I don't think we've equipped our leaders on how to do that, right? I think, be very candid. I think some leaders are leadership positions that don't need to be, and organizations are not being intentional about reshifting those individuals. Just because you're great at an individual contributor role doesn't mean that you're great at managing people. And I think I think some organizations and some individuals think that the way that I continue to progress is up, and that's not always the case, right? Sometimes we can expand scope, because I think sometimes we do detriment to teams and organizations when we put people over people that don't have, the innate leadership ability, and they don't have the drive to manage people. So I think those are things that I've noticed is really about making sure that we are equipping our leaders on how to do that, right? And making sure that our leaders are not just execution driven, but our leaders are people focused as well, right? So those are the things that I've seen.
Yeah. Koran, how do you find those leaders then? How do you find those leaders that, hey, there might be a great individual contributor and you think they'll be a great leader, a great manager, but they don't see that in themselves. Yeah. How do you find them and how do you advocate for them? Or what has been some of the things that you've seen either that you've done or that you've seen other leaders or other organizations do to bring up those leaders that can be human-centered?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, I think you'll know them. At the end of the day, you'll know them, right? You know bad leaders, you know good leaders. I think you know human-centric leaders and you know those that are not. Like, they just kind of rise to the top, right? I also believe that some leaders may not, some of them may not know. And so you kind of, for me, I sit back and I'm an observer and I watch. That's one of the things my mother used to tell me is, you don't have to say anything. Just sit back and watch and you'll learn everything that you need to learn. And I'm one type of leader that I don't say much at times because I want to observe who's engaging and who is not. And I think that is a way to recognize how individuals are human-centric, right? Oh, wow, look at how she managed that situation. Okay, look how he handled that particular situation. And so you start to see it in some of their behaviors. And those are the ones that you want to invest in and you want to continue to water, because I think that is the fruit that we will get. They don't know it themselves sometimes. And sometimes as leaders, we need to see it and water that seed that's planted so that they can, really fully grown and really be beneficial to the organization. Yeah. So those are just a couple of ways of what I've seen and what I do.
Koran, do you remember advocating for me at one time?
You're asking me all these questions, Eric, about 13-year friendship, right?
So I'll share this with you.
Okay, sure.
It's just the spirit of gratitude.
Absolutely.
there was a specific role that came open and at Intel when we were both working there, and I didn't see myself doing that role. We had a lunch, and you're like, Eric, I just recommended you for a particular role.
Okay.
It was for the program manager.
I do remember.
And I was like, what? And you're like, yeah, hopefully they'll reach out to you in the next hour or so. And I got back from lunch, and I saw there was an email there saying, hey, Eric, I think you might be interested in this because someone advocated for you. First, I just want to say, if I haven't said already thank you 1,000 times, just thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Because that role changed my life. But also, more importantly, that you saw something in someone else and you took your time, invested your credibility in someone else, and you said, hey, you know what? I advocate for this person, right? It means the world to me, but also a great role model for not only myself, but us to pay it forward to others, right? And say, hey, you know what? If Koran does this for me, how am I doing that for others as well?
Absolutely.
Can you share with me a little bit more about your story of someone doing that for you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, as you've grown your career.
So it immediately goes to at Intel. We'll do a lot of Intel stories because that was kind of like 12, 13 years of my work experience. So I was working in a staffing role, right? I was working in a staffing role. That was not my focus, but that was my way to get into Intel. So got recruited from my college, came back to Phoenix, working in a staffing role. And my leader, because we've had conversations, knew that leadership and development was like my passion. I got my degree in that. I believe in how leaders really cultivate organizations and teams and individuals. And so there was a position open in Intel that I was not qualified for. It was like 2 grades higher, right? But she told me to go apply, kind of what I did with you, right? And I was like, why? And she was like, and I'll never forget that she said, if you could do amazing at something that you don't enjoy, I can only imagine the impact that I get goosebumps just thinking about this. I can only imagine what you can do and the impact you can drive at something that you do. So I'm gonna put my neck out there for you and really help try to get you this role. I did get the role, right, because of her, right? I didn't believe I was capable, right? But she was just like, if you're doing amazing at what you just not excited about, I want to put you in a place where you can shine, right? And I will never forget that because that's what I try to do with roles that I have and opportunities that I have to help people shine in spaces, right, that I know that they can, that they may not even know, right? So being an advocate at this level that I'm at, that's one of my roles and those are my responsibilities, is to remove barriers and open doors for other individuals, right? And it doesn't matter gender, it doesn't matter color to me. It's about where do I see someone can be an asset to the organization, and not just for the organization, but also development for them. And I think that's the other piece, is how can we continue to increase their toolkit so they can be amazing here where we're at or somewhere else, right? So that's just my philosophy around that.
Koran, I love that sense of the toolkit, right? I think that's also part of my journey, was that early on in my career, someone gave me that encouragement too and said, hey, every role that you take on from here on out is simply just a tool into your toolbox.
Absolutely.
Don't be enamored about a title. Don't be enamored about a great level. Just be enamored about building that toolbox.
Yes.
Can you share with me a little bit more about how you get to know your employees, or how you encourage leaders to get to know employees to understand what toolbox they want to build in their careers?
It's conversation. At the end of the day, it's conversation, right? I meet with my employee twice a month. One is about status updates, and one is specifically about development. That is it, right? If they come in and want to talk about updates, I'm like, nope, this is about development. What do you want to do? Where you want to be? How can I support you? Because I think it's so important that we have those conversations, right? And it's a couple things. One, it lets you know as a leader where this individual wants to go from a progression perspective. It lets you as a leader understand how to help them, which helps with retention, right? But also the employee feels valued. That you took a moment to ask me about what I want to do. And then when you turn around and say, Koran, I know that you wanted to do this, and here's some resources, or I saw this and I want to send you to this particular training here, that's value. And people will stay at organizations when they feel valued and heard and appreciated. And so those are the things that I do, is just have those conversations, be intentional. You don't know your employees if you don't ask questions, right? And a lot of times, like us, we're very intentional. Hey, such and such leader, I want to have a conversation about Mike. Everybody's not going to take that initiative. So the leader has to build that safe space to be able to have those conversations, so those individuals feel comfortable having conversations about, development and progression.
Yeah. Koran, one of the things too that I think you're very intentional with too. You just mentioned it, right? About it, you do certain things that also helps with retention. But also some conversations could come up and say, you know what? My toolbox I'm trying to build it here, but I might just have to build it in another company. How do you navigate those conversations with those employees that you want to advocate for them, but it might not be not only in your organization but in your company too?
No, and I think those are as a leader, sometimes you have those kind of hard conversations, right? And you need to be intentional. You may have to tell them that this may not be the place where you can expand your toolkit. And sometimes I've been in places where I've had to tell the organization, I'm ready to do something different. Unfortunately, you may not have the space or the tools that I need, so I need to go somewhere else. I also believe that when you have these conversations continuously and you start to build a relationship with your employee and the employee has a relationship with you, those are not as hard as they could be when all of a sudden you've never had a development conversation and all of a sudden you're having this conversation, right? But so when you build those relationships, if it comes down the pipeline, you're not shocked because you kind of hear it in between the conversations. But if you're not having conversations with your employees about development, then of course this could be a hard conversation. So sometimes it's just you have to have the tough conversation, and I think that's going to be beneficial for the organization because again, now you have someone who is maybe not optimizing their opportunities because they don't feel like they have opportunity here or they don't feel like their skill set here. So you can relieve them and bring somebody in that is excited and is new and they're ready to go, but also you support that individual if they decide to go somewhere else. I think that's the other piece. I think a lot of times, and I'm gonna wrap up, I think a lot of times we're so focused on bringing people in the organization really, really well, but a lot of times we don't focus on exiting people really well. And that is just as important because they are your brand at that point. They are speaking about their experiences at that point. And so I'm really passionate about making sure that we are offloading or exiting people in a way that they still feel valued and acknowledged and important. And a great way you can do that as a leader is help them be successful in that exit.
Let's go back to treating the human being before they come into the organization. So it reminded me of one of the questions I ask when I have an opportunity to interview people. I ask them this question that kind of knocks them off a little bit. But I think it goes back to the spirit and the heart that you want to intend to really get to know them. I asked them the question, I said, what is the greatest strength that you have that you haven't had a chance to use yet in your career? And how would this role help you utilize that strength? And how can we help you in this role to make sure that that strength is best utilized? And it knocks them off because one, they're not expecting it because it's not a standard question.
Absolutely.
And two, I think it also knocks, because there's no right or wrong answer, right? It's just like, they're like, wow, you want to get to genuinely know something about me that doesn't fall into a rubric that we're trying to fill out sometimes in the interview process. But also they feel, wow, they want to listen to me, right? So regardless of if they become the actual employer or not, that candidate feels included, they feel listened to.
Absolutely.
And they're like, wow, they authentically care about what I want to do. And at that moment in time, we start having these conversations on, oh, wow, I do want this role today, but I feel like I could best be of service in this role doing it this way, right? Versus just replacing the previous person that was there. And so after a few years of utilizing that in the interview process, I've noticed that it gives me just an opportunity to get to know them way better early on. But as soon as they come in, we're knocking it out, right? Like we're like, hey, we already built a deeper relationship. It's not just a corporate professional one. It's more about, hey, how am I there to be of service to you as well?
And if I may, I love that, I love the last comment you just said, the last 3 words, of service to you, right? And I think as leaders, I and organizations, let's be very candid, I think sometimes we miss that, right? We are service to our external customers. We're service to our external vendors, right? And yes, we'll provide benefits and we'll provide what we need, the basic stuff, but are we really being of service to our employees? And I think that is so important. Because at the end of the day, to your point, when individuals feel like they are being served, hear me when I say that, there's a piece that you will get something out of that individual, right? I always say that my employees is my customer. It's not the external customer. My employee in the role that I drive is my customer. So how am I going to be a service to the employees of the organization? So having that servant leadership attached to the human-centric leadership, that's when you can really start to move organizations forward.
Yeah. And do you think that style of leadership has always been there and has always excelled? Or do you think it's needed today more than it was needed 10, 20, 30 years ago?
Yeah, I think A little bit of both, right? I think it's always been there. You have leaders that have always been focused on, servant leadership and human-centric leadership. I think sometimes they're not the majority, to be very candid, right? And so they have to, maneuver appropriately to be the leader that they are, because sometimes there was a season where you had to be a tough leader and you had to, be very direct, and you had to just, hammer down. And that's not what servant leadership is really all about. And that's not what human-centric leadership is all about, right? It's not that hammer. Yes, direct is appropriate, but knowing how to do that in an appropriate manner. So I think that, again, businesses are just so heads down right now and just trying to survive. And, I think some of this human centricity is not as a priority as it probably should be, right? And so that's why I speak about it. That's why I help and try to get those organizations that I support to understand what it is, because I understand the importance of it, right? And if I can help other leaders understand that, I think that's where we can win. And that's what this is all about, is winning.
Koran, share with us a little bit more than when you get to opportunity to work with these organizations, either in the capacity of the former roles that you're in, or you continue to mentor other organizations as well, because I know you do that too.
Yes.
And they come in different shapes and sizes, some global, some more domestic. What are some of the changes that you see in these organizations when you have a chance to make that impact in this work that you do?
Yeah, I think it's really about leaders wanting to. That's the first thing, right? You want to, embrace this type of work that I bring. And I think that's what's important to me. If I don't sense it, I have no problem telling somebody no, because I'm not about to do this work. And again, we go back to this performative, take all this time, because it's a detriment to the employee base, right? Because you rah, and then you don't execute anything that we've been working on, or they don't see it as a focus area. So I have no problem saying no to organizations. So let's just say that. So that's the first thing, right? I've learned that. I used to be a yes man. I'm not anymore. I have no problem saying no to an organization, or even just, a contracting opportunity or what have you. But I have seen leaders really want to go on this journey, right? And so I have seen leaders step in. I have seen leaders lean in. I have seen leaders become ambassadors and advocates for this work, right? Because they get it, right? I've also had, leaders that don't get it, and they are stuck in their ways. And I'm not changing. I've been this type of leader for, 20, 30, 40 years. And those are the ones that I'm like, okay, understood. We'll continue to help you with the nudging, but I'm not putting all my emphasis on there. I would rather go to that frozen middle that is excited about, or don't know that they're going to be excited about, and help them move, versus that 10 or 20% that's just not budging, right? And I have seen some great work from leaders stepping in. I have seen organizations transform because leaders understand their part in this work. And I think that's the piece. It's shifting mind frames, and also making sure that leaders understand that how they interact within the organization and the behaviors that they demonstrate really is what employees are watching. And that is where they either say, yes, this is an organization I want to be in, or no. And so that's where I get excited about, is seeing some of these leaders who didn't understand. And then when we get done with the work, they're now proponents of and advocates of, and they're talking to their peers where I couldn't get to them because of who I am, but they're going and helping champion the work that they just went through with their peers, that is helping their group of peers move forward. So it's been exciting to see.
That reminds me of one of my first managers I had in the oil and gas industry. I used to work for Shell, was Evelio Hernandez. And he's also very human-centered, very servant leadership mindset, like you were just sharing. And eventually I left that company. I came and I worked here in the semiconductor industry, grew my career, became a manager for the first time. And I reached out to him. I said, hey, Evelio, I just got hired now. I'm a people manager, and you're a role model for me in this space. A week later, I received a book from him.
Oh, wow.
Dedicating it to me, just saying, hey, Eric, I thought about you. This is a book about being a servant leader manager, right? And again, this goes back to your story, right? Of like, even though we don't get to work, together anymore, even though our careers have gone to different paths, he still invested in my growth, right? In my career. And to this day, we still stay in touch about just the work that we do. But also our relationship has been like this, right?
Absolutely.
Like we haven't worked together for years, but we've stayed engaged.
Absolutely.
What does the promise in the future look like for you, Koran, in this work? And where do you see organizations, or the potential organizations could go because of this human-centered leadership?
Right. First of all, I see employees excited about working, right? And let's be frank, you could ask 10 employees right now, are they excited about working? I don't know what the data is, but I would say a lot of them may or may not be, right? And I think that in this work that I'm trying to drive around human-centric leadership and even like servant leadership, I think employees will now understand how important their value is on the organization by their leaders, right? Their leaders are demonstrating what behaviors that they need to see. They're caring, they're empathetic, right? They're just showing up. And I think that when leaders show up in this space and employees really start to recognize that you see me, like you said in the interview question, that you see me. And not only you see me, but you hear me, you value me, you acknowledge me, right? You give me opportunities, right? I think employees will start to value the organization. They'll be committed to the organization because let's be frank, people are jumping every 2 or 3 years, right? They'll be committed to the organization. And that's when organizations can really start to thrive, right? I just feel like at this particular time, that piece of some of the strategy is missing, right? And not all, right? But I believe that the piece is missing a little bit. And so that is why, because I see the gap, that's why I'm trying to, where I can, fill that gap with some of this knowledge and resources that I have so that we can really start to transform organizational cultures so that people always say, don't just choose you, but they choose to stay with you. And I think that's what's most important.
So Koran, to really give the audience a full experience of an Eric and Koran conversation, I want to open it up to you too. Okay. What questions do you have for me?
Okay.
And the work that we sometimes get to share together and the journey we've been on.
So I know we talked a lot about leadership, right? And I value you because you have done some amazing work working at Intel and some other organizations, but stepping outside and doing you, right? Yeah. Like you're like, there's some stuff that I want to do that may not be corporate focused, where I'm at a job, 40 hours a week, but talk to me about how you came about being able to take that risk of just corporate I'm going to leave behind and I'm going to do Eric. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So it was a work in progress. It didn't happen from one day to another.
Okay.
My wife, Lorena, has her own business. So she left the corporate world now 7 years ago. So that was our first venture of seeing, this is what it is to build your own business. So I got to see that on a daily basis for the last 7 years, right? So that was a sense of comfort as well. But the second one was actually people advocating for me, right? So people were reaching out to me outside of the corporate world saying, hey, can you come and share this with us? Or can you come and do this with us? And I was like, sure. And then eventually it turned into, hey, can you come and do this for us? And how much do you charge for this? And that also became a self-reflection for myself too. It's like, I didn't know I could do this. And so it came also a little bit of like just removing myself from that imposter syndrome moment, right? And just being okay with, hey, let me just go and add value to this space. And also the third thing that I went through was kind of understand a little bit more what's the message I want to give that I know I could grow the impact that I want to make. I always go back to what Wes Moore says in his book, The Work. He talks about there's a difference between your job and your work.
Absolutely.
And sometimes we get obsessed with, this is my title, these are the things I could do. But your work is not necessarily about starting something, it's about ending something. And when I started to kind of do that self-reflection on, I love the corporate world, I love what I was doing, but I also felt that to a certain extent, I had already capped out on my work. And I said, wow, how can I continue to do my work to make the impact that I want to make outside of this space? And do I need to come outside of this space to go and do that? And so when I did that self-reflection, it helped me a lot. So I say, hey, you know what? This is the space I need to be in. And then also being very passionate about the intersection of technology and the human experience, because that's who I am, right? And so when we had this conversation about, you're like, Eric, what do you want to talk about? And I shared it with you. You're like, that's you. Right?
All day.
Right? And so that was the response I was going for, but that was also the reflection that I was having, and also my mentors, my colleagues, my sponsors were very encouraging on that journey as well.
So thank you for sharing that. Because I know there's some individuals out here that, see you do this and kind of following your journey, and it's just like, how did he get the courage enough to just leave a 2-week paycheck and go and do this great work, right? So, so the other thing too that I want to talk about is a little bit about leadership, right? I know we talked it on my end, right? But I know that is so important to you as well. So talk to me a little bit about, like, what's your definition of leadership? And then the second piece is, describe a leader that you just like want to model after, right? When you do work and you participate in organizations and you show up as a leader, talk to me about kind of some of those things that you saw from a leader because they have just demonstrated the type of leader you want to be.
That's a great question because when I had a chance to become a chief of staff for an organization at Intel, it's a role that even though you're interviewing for it, you need to be also very selective on who you're putting yourself up to be a chief of staff for.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so for myself, it was Jose Avalos, who is a fantastic leader. And I was very intentional with reaching out to him and the organization because I had a chance to get to know him and see him and follow his journey too. And so what resonated with me on who he is, transparency, authenticity, customer-centric on both sides, exactly what you had said. Customer are not only just external, but customer is like, hey, my employees are my customers as well. And the last thing was development. He was so passionate about development. And I remember when I had the conversation with him about this role, he didn't ask me exclusively about how could be of service to that particular role. He said, what are you thinking of doing after this role? So we can make sure that whatever you're doing today prepares you for that.
I love that.
That's the type of leader I wanted to be surrounded by. And so when I look at leadership from that perspective, that's an individual. With that said, I still think what also helps and supports the leader is the team around that person, right? And so today when I see some challenges that some companies have or some personal brands that certain executives lead or that they have some challenges with, I immediately go back to them too. I'm like, what is the team around them setting them up or giving them that guidance or advice? Because when you do have an opportunity to work hand in hand with an executive, you're the right-hand person. So they're asking you for advice.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean they're going to follow it all the time, but you're seeing how they flow through their day. And so that's one of the things I learned on being a chief of staff for $1 billion business at Intel was not only how do you support that individual, but who's the team around them that's making sure that not only we're representing the organization, the company, the customers, the employees in the right way, but making sure we're helping everyone navigate all those challenges together, right? So it's not just the leader, it's the entire organization going there along with that leader as well. But it goes back to even your initial point was like, you need to have that one leader that creates that culture.
Absolutely.
And so I was very fortunate that we were in an organization that had that culture and had that vibe, that we're all together on this journey together.
So what's next for Eric?
Oh.
You knew I was gonna go there. Yeah, you knew I was gonna go there. So what's next? What's next for Eric?
I really enjoy not only connecting with people. That's one of the reasons why we have this podcast live was like I get energy from individuals. So having an opportunity to go to different events, different conferences, and working with different organizations on talking about how fast this world is moving, but more importantly, the human piece of this work for me has been critical. And so I've been very fortunate that certain doors have opened up along this journey that I had never imagined opening up, but it's given me genuine fulfillment in this work on saying, hey, you know what, there are some challenges out there as this world is moving super fast, but if I can make a little bit of a mark on their journey on just bringing some additional empowerment into their work, if it's either HR organizations that I've had a chance to work with, education organizations, for-profit, non-profit organizations, I'm very passionate about just engaging in this work. And I feel that not only gives me an opportunity to make the impact I want to make, but more importantly, from a personal level, I feel like it's creating a different world and a better world for my little ones that will be inheriting the work that I get to do today.
And we appreciate you. We appreciate that work. Can I ask one more question?
Sure,
Just one more question. Last question. Because I want to get to know you just outside of this. So it's going to be an off the wall question. I'm going to ask.
No, that's what we do.
If you're on the plane, when you travel, what is the one thing that you must take with you when you travel?
Oh, a book.
Okay.
Yeah,
Why?
A book. I just love to dive into stuff, right? And so I either have, like actually today I have Shattering the Stem Ceiling by Orieta Verdugo in my carry-on. But I always try to carry a book. I always try to dive into something because I'm an active learner, right? I'm a lifelong learner. And I think I've sent you some books a few times.
You have, absolutely.
Like, Ron, what's your address? I have a secret place.
You have.
And so for me, it's the opportunity just to continuously learn.
Okay.
With that said, I mean, you travel. What's the one thing you have to take?
Oh, Dramamine. I don't know why, but I'm telling you, if I don't have Driven Beat, I am going to have the most horrible trip,
Really?
right?
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. And I don't know if it's me in my own mind because I've been taking it for so long, but Driven Beat is a must. And then my ear pods. I have to have.
Got it.
I have to have my ear pods because it's just something about, like you said, I could listen to an audio book. I could listen to some music and just relax. I think the plane ride is so relaxing to me. So if I can get in a zone and just be present in my 12B seat or 12C seat, right. It's a beautiful place to be for me.
I love that.
Yeah.
Koran, where can people find you? Where can people connect with you?
Right,
where can people continue this conversation with you
absolutely.
on your journey?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is probably the best way to get in contact with me, right? I think that is where I spend a lot of my time. I do a lot, you're a book reader, I'm an article reader. I love listening and reading different people's perspective on the topics that are passionate to me. So LinkedIn is where you will find me. Please reach out. I'm more than happy to have conversations with people. I'm like you. This is what I love to do, right? We could talk on the phone, we could do all that stuff, but having this personal connection is what gives me purpose, and it gives me to you want to leave a thumbprint, and to me, you're talked about the work. For me, legacy is so important to me. It is so, everywhere I go, I want to leave some type of legacy of a piece of me, because I think that is why I do what I do, because I want to leave legacy for workplace organizations. So LinkedIn, that's where you can reach out to me.
Well, Koran, you have left an amazing legacy with the Future Human Experience.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today. And I'm so grateful not only for your friendship, your mentorship, your guidance on this journey, your support, but thank you for sharing it with everyone today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Yeah.